I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Coveney, the Foreign Minister, actually also in charge of defence, I think. Simon Coveney, who's speaking to us directly from Dublin. Very good to see you this evening. One of the things that we've all remarked upon is Joe Biden, the new president's pride in his Irish origins. Do you think that Ireland will now play a role that actually the UK played for quite a long time, which is of being that bridge between the European Union and Washington?
Well, I mean, I think it's wrong to describe it in those terms, that it's one or the other, that it's somehow if you're pro-Irish, you're not pro-British. The truth is, I think many US presidents are both pro-British and pro-Irish and have very special relationships with both countries. And that is certainly the case for this new president. I mean, he wears his heart on his sleeve. His personal and family connection to Ireland is very close, and he's very emotional about that at times. And so I do think when you look at his administration, there are some very influential Irish Americans as part of his new team. So for all of those reasons, I expect that when I travel or the Taoiseach travels to Washington, we'll get a very warm reception. And that is an opportunity for Ireland to help President Biden in the work that he needs to do internationally in terms of ensuring that the US is back in terms of global leadership around multilateralism, climate action, protecting human rights, protecting democracy. In many ways, while we were close to the Trump administration too, because Irish governments always make it their business to be close to Washington. But the truth is that President Trump's foreign policy was very divisive, caused a lot of tension, particularly transatlantic. Whereas I think Joe Biden will be the opposite to that. But if you're asking me the question, will Joe Biden be a US president that values the special relationship with the United Kingdom? I think the answer is yes, I think he will. He's a very decent man. He wants to build relationships on the basis of trust. And I think the US values their relationship with the UK deeply, and so they should. But I think he will also value his relationship with my country, I'm glad to say, and I expect he'll visit Ireland early in his presidency, as of course he'll visit the UK as well. So,
I mean, would you imagine?
I think I've heard a lot of commentary that somehow talks about one or the other. The truth is that the Biden administration is structured in a way that wants to build transatlantic relationships in a way that the administration that they're following certainly didn't do. And that's good news for Britain, and it's good news for Ireland, and it's good news for the EU as well as a whole.
So what you seem to be saying, because we had Kim Darroch, who I'm sure you know, the former British ambassador in Washington, on the show last week, and actually, as I was pointing out to Ed Balls, he said that he thought that Boris Johnson would pay a price for having been too obsequious in his relationship with Donald Trump. But you think Joe Biden is one of those people who lets bygones be bygones?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I mean, look, he's a very experienced politician. He's been around for a long time. He's somebody that knows now that he has 4 years to get a lot of things done, both internally in America, and I think a huge amount of his energy will go into trying to heal wounds in his own country. And that's why I think Britain and Ireland and the EU needs to be a lot more proactive, perhaps, than we would normally be. In terms of trying to give leadership around a transatlantic relationship to help him do that. But I think if and when that happens, we will have an open door in Washington that will welcome that. And so, I think, of course, this depends how the British Prime Minister decides to build a relationship with Joe Biden. And clearly the relationship between Prime Minister Johnson and President Trump was a close one. But I don't think that Joe Biden, certainly from our experience, is the kind of person that's going to hold grudges. He will want to build new relationships and look forward rather than look back.
I mean, just in terms of America's re-engagement with the rest of the world, which is something Joe Biden promised today, one of the big issues around is the way that China has persecuted the Uyghurs. America has decided this is genocide. Do you think Ireland and indeed the EU will join with America in classifying what's going on as genocide?
Well, genocide is a very strong word, and we'll see what the new administration in Washington, does with that. But certainly, I think, and I mean, I can speak for the EU and for Ireland, obviously not for the UK here, but certainly there is a very serious conversation ongoing within the EU right now as to how, as a union, we build a relationship in the future with China. China is a huge economy and country. It can't be ignored. A relationship with China is an essential reality. But how we ensure that relationship also is consistent with our values around democracy and protecting human rights and minorities and freedom of speech and so on is something that has to be part of that relationship. But I think certainly, and I'm used to this coming from a small country, the way Ireland has a say here in a way that really matters is to work through the strength of a combined voice in the European Union. And that's why you will see, I think, in the European Union an attempt to try to build an approach to China that is a collective one. And I think you'll see quite a lot of partnership potentially with the United States on that. And hopefully the UK will be part of that conversation as well.
Now, closer to home, one of the issues in Northern Ireland is that the shelves of supermarkets aren't as stocked as, people would normally expect them to be. Do you think that is a teething problem with the new Brexit arrangements, or do you think, actually, as the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis claims, that this is all to do with COVID-19?
Well, I don't think it's only to do with COVID-19, although certainly that doesn't help. But, the supermarket shelves were full before Christmas, and there are some issues now in terms of supply chains. And so that's clearly a Brexit issue. It's part of the reality of the United Kingdom now being outside not only of the European Union, but of the customs union and single market as well. And what we have in place in Northern Ireland is a protocol which effectively de facto creates an extension of the EU single market for goods into Northern Ireland, even though Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, is outside of the EU. And that requires a certain amount of checks on goods coming from GB into Northern Ireland. And that involves some disruption that I think companies will take some time to get used to. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. Some companies simply weren't ready for the change that Brexit brings. It's a very real change. The United Kingdom is what the EU call a third country. And so whether it's sanitary and phytosanitary checks, whether it's health certification, whether it is customs codes and checks and systems, all of that is now part of trade across the Irish Sea. And so Northern Ireland, of course, has special treatment. And we have made a huge effort to try to minimise those checks and that disruption. But nevertheless, it's there and it's very real. And the truth is that we have to now learn to live with that new reality and make it work for companies and for supply chains to ensure that supermarket shelves aren't partly empty in the future. And I can assure you we will work very proactively with the EU and, of course, with the British government to try to make sure that we can do that.
And just very briefly, when you hear a DUP member like Geoffrey Donaldson say that he thinks the economic damage that these arrangements are causing Northern Ireland means that, the Good Friday Agreement is being undermined by this agreement, what do you say to him?
Well, I would say that, the DUP had an opportunity to deliver a very different kind of Brexit. Prime Minister May, when she was Prime Minister, offered a different proposal that wouldn't have, in many ways, separated Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom in the way that the Northern Ireland Protocol has to do to prevent border infrastructure re-emerging on the island of Ireland. But the DUP rejected that approach, just like they've rejected this approach as well. So, there was an opportunity for a very different kind of Brexit that would have avoided much of the trade disruption that we're now experiencing. And people chose not to take that opportunity, to look for something that, in our view, was never achievable. And so now we have the reality of Brexit, the kind of Brexit that the British government wanted and has delivered. But there's a consequence to that, and that is that Northern Ireland has special arrangements put in place, designed by the British government and the EU together, which effectively, as I say, creates a de facto extension of the EU single market for goods on the Isle of Ireland into Northern Ireland. And we are minimising, to the greatest extent possible, the checks on goods coming from GB into Northern Ireland under those arrangements. But those checks are still there, and they have a disruptive impact. And we need to try to work and put new systems and new supply chains in place now to minimise that disruption, to make sure that it works for everybody. But, let's not pretend that there was some easy solution that was an alternative to what we have now. We had one. It was called the backstop, and I think in many ways, certainly from a Northern Ireland perspective, I think it would have worked better than the current arrangements. But that was rejected by the British side, not by the EU or by Ireland. And so we have the next best thing, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol. But let's not pretend that Brexit doesn't force that kind of change, because it's the downside to Brexit that a lot of people didn't want to talk about, but they're facing the reality of now.
Simon Coveney, listen, as always, delightful talking to you, and we hope you'll come back soon. Thank you so much.